So as COVID-19 continues to be a part of our daily life, we transition from a president who was not too supportive of a national mask mandate to one who does desire a national mandate for us to wear masks. So the question is, can he do it? If so, how and will he do it? Well, you're going to find out in today's episode. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the COVID-19 crisis. We're going to look at some statistics in the United States and around the world. Then we're going to turn our attention to the national mask mandate issue. We're going to look at what other countries are doing. We're going to look at what we're doing here in the United States and what may happen when President-elect Biden takes office in January. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share me on social media. And if you want to support the channel, we've got merch. We've got hats, we've got t-shirts that say Lawyer Up, and we've got coffee mugs. And remember, all the proceeds from merch sales go back into making this a better channel. So if you want to pick up some merch, the link is in the comment section below. So when we talk about a national mask mandate, we start with the problem, and the problem is COVID-19, of course. Some statistics. In the United States, we have over 10 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and almost 250,000 deaths that are attributed to the virus. When you look worldwide, there have been 52 million confirmed cases and 1.3 million deaths. And just this week, President-elect Joe Biden has formed his COVID task force, and they've put out a website which details his plans for dealing with the virus. Now, as we all know, Joe Biden is in favor of masking. And as we all know, President Donald Trump was not a big fan of masking. So today, in this particular Lawyer Up, we're not going to be discussing or talking that much about whether masks work or whether they don't work. You guys can form your own opinions as to that. You can find an article to support whatever position you want to take on that issue. Most reasonable people, they understand that masks are not 100% effective. And most reasonable people realize that masks are not 0% effective. They're effective somewhere between, say, 1% and 99%, right? And the effectiveness of masks really depends on what type of mask it is, whether it's properly worn, the duration of exposure, and the viral load. So when we're talking about the effectiveness of masks, it is an equation that has more variables than constants. We know it probably helps to some degree, but it's certainly not foolproof. So we're not going to talk about that today. We're talking about the concept of the federal government being able to force all 50 states and the people therein to wear masks in public. So to gain a little perspective on what's going on around the globe, we know that over 100 countries have required nationwide mask mandates. And the UN recognizes 195 countries. Now there's some other territories and areas where they have self-proclaimed themselves as countries. If you add those in, it's over 200. But the point is, half of the world right now is under a nationwide or a countrywide mask mandate. In the United States, we have 34 of the states that have already put in place a statewide mask mandate. So we're really only talking about 16 states that don't have a statewide mask mandate right now. And a lot of people say, well, those are the red states. Well, when you look at the individual states, that's not exactly true. 3 of them are blue states and actually voted for Biden. So you can't just put them all in one basket when we're talking about these states without a statewide mask mandate. So then we ask the question, can the president step in and force these states to have a mask mandate? Can he do a nationwide mask mandate? In most of the videos that are out there on this topic, people are taking the position that the president doesn't have the authority to do this. And it all boils down to how you define what a nationwide mask mandate even means. But I'm going to take the position opposite of most people, I'm going to say yes, the president does have the ability to, in effect, put into place a mask mandate that would extend to all 50 states. And here's how. First and foremost, the president has authority over all federal properties, right? And Joe Biden has already said he is going to issue an executive order over federal lands and federal properties that anybody on those properties has to wear a mask. And so that will include our federal parks and all of our federal buildings, courthouses, and those types of places. There will be an executive order requiring people to wear masks in those buildings. And because it's federal, it is nationwide. So in and of itself, that is a nationwide mask mandate. But the more interesting question is, what about extending it to those 16 states that currently don't have such a mandate? And there are a couple of mechanisms available to a president to, in essence, force states to mask. The first one is the Public Health Service Act. And I'm going to read to you section 361 that states, the Secretary of Health and Human Resources has the authority to make and enforce regulations necessary to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable diseases in the United States or between states. So it would seem that the Public Health Service Act gives the Secretary of Health and Human Services that power to enact such a mandate. Now, we know that that individual is a cabinet member of the president. So obviously, he is hand-selected without any confirmation process by the president. If Joe Biden wanted a national mask mandate, that is one avenue, is handpicking somebody who agrees to go ahead and enact it and putting him in that position as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. That would be one way that the president could effectively enforce a nationwide mask mandate. A second option is, of course, the funding reduction option. The president could simply require states to follow CDC procedures or guidelines or risk losing certain types of federal funding. We saw this several years ago when the federal government wanted to reduce national highway speeds down to 55 miles an hour. And a lot of you younger people out there probably don't even remember when speed limits were that low. But they were reduced in all 50 states, and it was kind of fought about in the courts. And the conclusion was that the federal government couldn't force states to lower their speed limits. So what did the federal government do? They said, well, okay, you don't have to lower your speed limits down to 55 miles per hour, but if you don't, we're not going to give you any highway funds. And so over time, there were a couple of holdouts, but over time, the states realized we need these federal highway dollars. And so all 50 states fell into line because of this funding withholding threat that the federal government has over the states. So that is a second avenue that a president would have to kind of force states to do what he wants them to do. Now that we know that the president probably can force states, the question is, will he do that? And you kind of have to look at some of the statements that Joe Biden said on the campaign trail, and also at his new website that dictates how they're going to approach COVID-19. Now, if you look at the plan on the website, there's no mention of a forced national mask mandate. Instead, he is choosing to take a persuasive approach with the states. The specific language on the website says the Biden-Harris transition team plans to implement mask mandates nationwide by working with governors and mayors. And the specific statement on there says, Biden will call for, quote, Americans to wear a mask when they are around people outside their household, and for governors to make that practice mandatory in their state, and for local authorities to also make it mandatory to buttress state orders. So effectively, the president is looking to states and large cities and mayors in those cities to enact their own measures for mandatory masking. It makes it easier on the president because he doesn't have to look like the bad guy. And the reality is the federal government really can't enforce this anyway. The FBI is their police force, and we're not going to have FBI agents running around enforcing mask mandates. It's not a really good use of federal resources. Now, we know not every state is going to go along with this, and not every city is going to go along with this. And if there is some sort of a forced situation from the federal government, it's going to wind up in the courts. But ultimately, it is an interesting question. We know that Biden favors a national masking mandate. We know that he has mechanisms from which to put it into play. However, it is yet to be determined if he will take advantage of those things or leave it up to the states to decide for themselves. Well, that's today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, smash that like button for me. Also, share me on social media. If you've got friends that you think would like this channel, invite them to subscribe. And last but not least, if you got something to say, comment below. Again, my name is Joshua Roberts, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.